Hi everyone, and welcome to July's Bradford Cloud User Group's virtual meetup. Today we have Abdul Kazi. He will introduce himself. His session will be on Microsoft Purview, an introduction to Microsoft Purview. All our sessions are recorded, so if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. The YouTube channel link is in the chat now. And if you're not signed up to Meetup, all our future meetings will be hosted on Meetup or will be advertised there. Please join the virtual group. I'll hand over to Abdul and he'll do an introduction for himself. Abdul, over to you.
Thanks so much, Sajid. Let me share my screen real quick, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, hi everybody. Sajid and Imran, thanks for having me back again. It's been a while since I came back. And I'll be presenting on Microsoft Purview. So with that being said, let's go into the introductions. So yeah, my name is Abdul Kazi. Been in the IT industry for almost 20 years now. I'm a cloud architect, mainly focused on Azure. I also dabble in identity space, so IAM, Entra ID. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer. I used to be an Azure MVP, but unfortunately I didn't get renewed. And I also run a meetup, so Cloud Come With Us. I am a co-host of that. So if you want to come speak to us, we're always looking for speakers. Or if you want to basically join any of our sessions, look us up on X. We're happy to have you on there. And I have a blog. You can take a look at my speaking engagements there. I have a blog. The blog is not really active, but I do have quite a bit of material that people still reference and come back to me on that. So let's talk about the agenda. Since we're going to be talking about Purview, we'll start with data and security. What is Purview? And then we'll talk about the three different phases of Microsoft Purview. So data security, data governance, risk and compliance. And just a disclaimer, Purview is such a big product. I'm just going to be really scratching the surface. I'm not going to go into detail today, because even each topic, like even data security, can take multiple sessions just to go through. So what I'll do today is just talk about what Purview is and then go through the basics. So just to give you an idea what Purview is, specifically in this market, Purview and Fabric is really upcoming now. Everybody's been talking about Microsoft Purview, so I thought, why not do a session on this? With that being said, let's talk about data, right? So data has really become a lifeblood of every business. We're producing so much data now. As you can even see from the screen, we produce data in our personal life, in our private life. Think about the messages we receive for our work. Emails, we get Teams messages, we have other messages, somebody's messaging you somewhere. So the data explosion is way too much. And how do you manage that data, right? Because the challenge with businesses is you have not only we're producing data, we have to govern that data, because there might be confidential information, there might be PII in there, personal identified information, or there might be PI, the intellectual information of the company, trade secrets. So this is becoming the most forefront discussion for any business now. Plus, now factors coming in such as hybrid work, digital AI transformation, that is making cloud more prevalent, and the market, is trying to address how do you really address the data security side of things, data governance, and data compliance. Each day we're like, I work in the Azure space, and every day we've been asked, okay, how do we make this secure? It's no longer, when, but it's going to be how you're going to make this secure. So every single day, the data is exploding, and people have to make sure that there are no gaps. The exposure is limited. So how do you not expose your infrastructure gap? and with that also reducing your costs, because the more data we produce, the cost of storing the data is also becoming higher as well. So you kind of have to balance out how the data is coming in and how that's going to be stored, and how the complex, and it's always becoming complex. Now we also live in multi-cloud environments, so you might have a private cloud, you might have a public cloud, and even with public cloud, might be in multiple public clouds, AWS, Azure, GCP, Oracle, what have you, right? So especially on the enterprise customers, when I talk to them, they're like, yep, we have data in multiple clouds now. We want to make sure that all the clouds are secure, even our on-prem is secure. So this is really top of mind for especially the CISOs. With that being said, discovering and managing data is challenging. So, and the stats are a bit older, but as you can see, 88% of organizations no longer have confidence to detect and prevent loss of sensitive data, because data is so prevalent now. Anybody can produce data, and how do you classify the data? Has the company really classified? Is your data going or moving into the dark web now? Like, a lot of people are saying, hey, my data on the dark web, even on a personal level. A lot of companies, there are specific companies who say, yep, you can go and take a look if your data is on the dark web or not. But yeah, those are the biggest issues we are dealing with from a compliancy and data aspect. So now, how do you protect and govern your data where we live? So this is a perfect example, right? We have data on premise, we have data in Office 365, or email. Then you have, as I mentioned, you get messages on Teams. How do you archive those? There could be information that could be confidential for the companies, right? How do you manage that piece? There's Exchange Online. A lot of companies have requirements that they have to keep data for 7 years for auditing purposes, for compliance reasons. So that data is becoming there. You might have to have some data for legal holds because you might be going through a litigation process. Same thing with SharePoint Online, Power BI, and the non-Microsoft Cloud, right? So for the Microsoft Cloud, it's easier because everything is under one ecosystem. But what about the SaaS applications which are outside of the Microsoft purview, if you will? Like AWS or Box or other SaaS applications, you still have to have that data from a compliance aspect. So that's the biggest challenge. Um, you know, Getting everything together is the biggest challenge that we face today. So one of the challenges that we have, and this slide's going to talk to it, is know your data. A lot of people don't even know where their data exists because we're producing data all over the places. People have multiple devices now, meaning, think from your aspect, you might even have multiple mobile devices, cell phones, and the data is coming. You might be mixing your personal and professional data together. A lot of companies make sure that um, you have a physical device, so you keep your personal data separate from your work data, those kind of things. And then how do you protect data loss? So, like encryption is no longer a method anymore. So a couple of years ago, we used to have encryption. All the devices are encrypted now. If you lose a device, you're secure and whatnot. But we've kind of gone beyond that, even because one of the challenges we have now is we want to work from any device from anywhere. So locking down everything is sometimes not an option, and you need access to device or data from any device. So you're accessing data from any device, it has to be secure. So that also opens up a lot of challenges. With that being said, you have to really balance data security and productivity. Like I said, we want to work from any device, anywhere, anytime. We're not in those days where you would be VPNing into your system and then accessing the files. People want to work from anywhere. That's why you have to have conditional access, meaning you have to label your data. Data classification is absolutely critical. I still see a lot of people don't have data classification, meaning they're not saying, okay, this data is classified, this is confidential, this is highly confidential, this is sensitive data. You have to start labeling those. Um, and then DLP, data loss prevention, those actions have to be taken. So for example, if you start typing a social insurance number or social security number, I don't know what that looks it's called for the UK, but like an identifier number that the government issues. If you start typing that, or if you even type a credit card in an email, the DLP is gonna kick in and say, okay, this is PII, and that should block from sending that email to somebody, or that should be grayed out. So those are things, mechanisms you have to kind of build in, um, and some companies are already doing it, but those are things that really need to be prevalent. This has to become second nature now. Um, and we'll talk about some of those policies. I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but um, at the end of the day, the data is still there. How do you really secure your data um, with enabling productivity as well, right? So those are things that are becoming really important now. Um, Sensitive labeling is becoming absolutely critical now. DLP policies have become really critical now uh, for the workplace to make sure that you can access the data, the right people can access the data, but the data does not leave um, the wrong places or does not get into the hands of the wrong people. So with that being said, we're going to be talking about Microsoft Purview, and honestly, this is such a beast of a product. It does has three different facets, if you will. So under the umbrella of Microsoft Purview, you have data security, data governance, and risk and compliance. Um, I'm not going to go through all of that today. What I'll do is for data security, I'll talk about the different topics and then we'll kind of highlight that. But just want to give you a sense of these are the three things, right? So data, so from a, because this is such a comprehensive solution that organizations have to kind of take a step back and take a look and see, okay, what exactly are we trying to achieve here? Because you might have data across the organization and then you might lack visibility, right? And then you need to start thinking about, okay, how are you going to protect the data? How does the governance even look like for data? Um, what I've seen, a lot of companies still do not have governance for their data, meaning they don't have a specific governance policy or even a board for governing the data, um, because it also has to go through change, should be going through change control, making sure that those policies are okay from a compliance standpoint, from a legal standpoint, and from a risk standpoint, and uh, how those policies or guidelines are going to affect um, the risk. So how do you manage risk? Because it's all about managing the risk these days. Companies know that eventually, um, there might be some leakage because the way the data is, it's way too much. But you have to minimize your risk. And how do you manage the life cycle of the data? Because what used to happen before is we used to have, let's say, systems, we used to bring the systems up and then bring the systems down, meaning there used to be a life cycle between systems. But now because of cloud, everything is always up and running. It's always 24/7. So sometimes you don't even look at the system, say, okay, yeah, this platform is going to be decommissioned in like 5 years or X amount of time. Now everything is always updating. So that's the other challenge, that we don't think from a governance aspect, we don't think from a data aspect, and the lines are getting really blurry with even within the IT management. So before, people used to do data only. Now, you have people who are doing, and I guess when you move to the cloud, you're pretty much doing everything. So perfect example is a person who manages the cloud. They have to do networking, storage, and um, uh, compute. All three have to be there. It's not siloed. Whereas before, in the enterprise world, or even larger organization, when you were on-prem, you would be siloed in those departments. So today, the roles are really blurry in the traditional IT, where everybody's doing pretty much there, and security cannot be a afterthought. So the first one is data security, and these are what is covered under data security under Microsoft Purview. So Microsoft Purview data loss prevention, we'll talk about, and we'll talk about these briefly. I'm not going to go much into detail, but even each of these I can talk um, in detail, and this would probably require a session, like just alone, like DLP, there's labeling involved, there's the way you set up the data security investigation, which is in Purview right now, and then the preview information protection. So that actually is becoming very prevalent now. And then the privilege access management, specifically for Microsoft Purview. So that actually people are taking advantage of this. And the insider risk management, I'll show you in the portal. So basically, how do you manage the risk? So, and that's the first piece of it. You start with the data security. The second one is your data governance, right? So basically, data governance, how do you map out or provide a foundation for effective data discovery? Because if you don't know what data you have, you won't be able to manage it. So the first piece is starting to analyze the metadata across software as services or operation systems in your hybrid environment, on-prem environment, even in your multi-cloud environment. And that's a huge journey, right? It doesn't happen overnight. That you have to kind of map it out and see what capabilities are there. Obviously, you'll have to bring all the data together, and that's how your the preview data map is really good, where you start mapping out all your sensitive data and start labeling them. Um, and lastly, the third facet is really the risk and compliance. So the preview audit, the communication compliance, the compliance manager. So the compliance manager actually kind of spits out a scorecard, if you will, and tells you, okay, where are you compliant? What changes can you make? What kind of things you can do to improve your security posture? So Microsoft actually kind of does a great job of that. And then you have the e-discovery, so it kind of does the e-discovery for you. And we'll talk about in the next couple of slides. And by the way, I want this to be more of a interactive session. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask any questions. So one of the goals, of the Microsoft Purview is to really have a catalog. So, and the data catalog actually provides you a platform to have data governance and drive business value. And then you define what that would look like, right? So for example, organize your data with business domain. So for example, you might say, okay, we have a governance domain, and we are going to be defining the organization through our department. So let's say you have marketing or finance, providing context for your data assets. And that's going to be the boundary that enables the common governance, ownership, and discovery of the data products and businesses, right? Because the thing is, you have to have ownership. Who is going to take ownership? You're producing data, but then if nobody takes ownership of the data that we have produced, then how are you going to manage that? So that's why the governance domain is really good, because it's like you're saying, okay, manage your own data. So any data that is, let's say, coming under finance, they would be responsible. They have their OKRs, they have to have the business objectives, and they have to basically make sure that that data is defined properly. The next one is your data products, right? So related to business domains are data products. A data product is a business construct with a name, description, and an owner. So again, those kind of things are also coming in the context of the business domains, meaning once a marketing team has produced a data, they have to contextualize and say, okay, these are things that the data is being consumed for, and how are we going to be securing that data? So there's quite a bit of element when it comes to data cataloging. Uh, the other one I want to point out is the critical data element, meaning um, not all data is the same, right? So that's why we have to identify which data is important or which data is more sensitive, and you have to dedicate resources to manage the quality of the data, because at the end of the day, it's going to be costly. If you say, yep, you can paint a brush for everything, meaning you cannot say, yeah, all data is critical or all data is sensitive. You have to define which data is going to be critical, and then how do you manage it, because there's a cost to it. So for example, you might need to store data for 7 years. If all data is going to be stored for 7 years, that's going to be a huge cost. Like, think of the exponential cost there, right? So you have to define the data. And depending on the data classification, you might say, yeah, we might put this data in cold versus hot versus, cool, and then even archive this data. So that could be the cost savings based on the data classification as well. So that's really on the data side of things. And then I also want to touch on the OKRs, so objectives and key results in Microsoft Purview. So these are really trackable business objectives tied to governance domain and data products to emphasize the value of data. Meaning, you link data products directly to real business objectives. And based on that, you might say, okay, this is how the engineering best practice is going to be done. This is how we see the business value, or this is how the data state is going to be defined. So, and that's obviously part of the data governance for the IT team. And with that being said, the next asset would be data access policies, right? So you create the data catalog access policies, allowing you to manage the data products and set up systems to provide access to users, because you can create all the right catalogs, but if you don't provide the right access, that's going to be challenging. So you need to have data access policies where you're providing the right access to the users who would be requesting it. And I guess lastly, the search, because once we have a lot of data, you can enable the search. So the Microsoft Data Catalog offers great browse experience that the users can explore to enable the data and collecting the data. And then, because think about it, the data is going to be coming from multiple sources, right? It's not from one source. Specifically, if you're in multi-cloud environment, you have to collect all the data. So the hierarchy has to be defined. The data sources have to be defined in the data catalog, and that is a great feature for the Microsoft Purview, that you can search and browse data easily. And then lastly, health management. You have to look at the data and analyze and track your journey of the data governance. Is it healthy? Are there any issues with the data? If you come with, or if there are any issues, how is the health being handled? Meaning, what steps are we taking to improve data health or governance health, right? Because obviously there's going to be things that need to be addressed based on the risk. So those are things that are part of the data catalog, and when setting up the data catalog, these things have to be ironed out. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into the planning, so there has to be quite a bit of discussions between the other business units to make sure everybody is on the same page. You have to have stakeholder buy-in and other people buy-in, because you want to make sure that whoever is bringing the data is also qualified. It is coming under the governance domain. Uh, it is ensuring end-to-end visibility of data quality with each domain, meaning each business domain, like finance and marketing, they're owning up to their data is good. And then because the data is going to be aggregated to the data catalog, so you want to make sure that all that data is also qualified when it comes in. So now let's talk about a couple of the different features of the Microsoft Purview. So the Microsoft Purview audit. So auditing solution in Microsoft Purview helps organize effectively response to security events, right? So let's say there's a forensic investigation going on, there's an internal investigation going on, or if there's a compliancy obligation, which could be SOC, HIPAA, you know, SOC 2. And as organizations get bigger, you might have thousands of users and you might have hundreds of admins performing these services. You want to capture and retain your audit logs. That really becomes an issue, specifically if there's a compliance and legal investigation that is going on. Sometimes company, there might be an e-discovery process happening because of litigation issues that the company is going through. So those capabilities have to be taken into account. And then, as you can see, the audit feature comes with a standard and premium version. Obviously, there's going to be different costs and different feature set. But one of the different, or the reason people would probably go with the premium is 1 year default retention period. So if you want to keep data for more than that time frame, then you probably go with the premium one versus the standard one, which is enabled by default, and it still is searchable. You can still search all your data catalogs, and the GUI is really good. But obviously, a lot of people might even just use the APIs and stuff. You might call on different APIs. So yeah, that's the Microsoft Purview audit. And then let's talk about the discovery now. So the e-discovery, again, as I said, some companies might be going through the e-discovery process, and this could be across the board, right? Not only just for SharePoint or Teams, could be on Exchange, for even for other products. So, and this is really the process that identifies the delivering information that in a legal case. So it really, so first, the process, that's how you do the e-discovery, is going to be you trigger the event prompt, creating a new case in discovery, and then it creates a managed cases. Because what happens is e-discovery in Purview, for each case, you create a new case. So it's a case by case basis, right? Because that's how all the information is going to be stored in there. And then you can export the search results. You can create the review sets and create and manage holds. Especially the holds are going to be for, like, sometimes the legal hold for litigation purposes. So this does a great job. And obviously, I have to say this, there's Copilot integration with e-discovery with the embedded experience. So it does summarize, review, and set everything. So so it's pretty much, keyword query language. So it, like, KQL queries, you can run those to do the e-discovery. But yeah, Copilot is integrated with the e-discovery and makes it easier for people to search and get information from that. So you might be asking, okay, what exactly is the e-discovery solution, right? So these are the couple of things you can do with the content search for e-discovery. You can search and export content across Microsoft 365 data sources. Like I said, that's going to be included. So for example, that would be your SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, OneDrive, Teams. So across the Microsoft 365 data sources, you can bring that on. And then obviously with there's two e-discovery products, or I guess SKUs, standard and premium. So the standard one, you create the cases, assign managers and associate sources and export. You put, as we always do with e-discovery, you do legal holds and manage custodians and notifications. So make sure that the data doesn't get deleted. You also can set access review sets. To make sure that the SharePoint version or other team versions are there in case you need to go back. And then you can analyze the data with tagging, and it can also analyze the content to streamline the review process. And there are predictive coding models to prioritize the relevant items. So you say, okay, I want to look at legal hold for this. It is going to give you, so there's already a model that it has built in. And then for the premium one, it obviously includes everything that the standard has, but it also does indexing and there are a couple of other different features on there. But everybody, specifically if a company is going through legal or going through legal verification, they are going to be going through e-discovery. And with the e-discovery process, everything is going to be, like legal hold is going to be there, and then people are going and you'll assign case management. There are going to be people assigned to the project, and people are going to be making sure that the process is followed through. So now moving on to compliance manager. So compliance manager really simplifies compliance and reduces risk by providing a couple of things. So first, it really provides a pre-built assessment based on common standards. And if you go into the portal, and I'll show you the portal, it's going to spit out a score. It's going to show you what things are being achieved, what has been completed, what needs to be rectified. So those are pretty much standard things. And then it shows you step-by-step improvement actions to make sure that you improve your score. And compliance score, it also shows you a compliance score that shows overall compliance posture, meaning what things can you improve and what things are that is Microsoft recommending based on your requirements. The key elements of the compliance manager is a couple of things. One is control, the other one is assessments, regulations, and improving action. So if you have a regulation, the compliance manager is going to help you to achieve that piece. And with that being said, the compliance score. So let's talk about the compliance score. So as you can see, the compliant on the screen, so that it shows the impact, right? So it shows the impact in the point system. So it helps an organization understand its current compliance posture, helps prioritize action based on the potential to reduce risk. So it might say, self-service password reset is not enabled. You need to enable that. That's going to give you a good posture. And it also gives you some kind of action items that you can do to achieve or increase your compliancy scoring from there. It also, you can take actions to make sure that some of the preventive things are there. So obviously, because what happens is the compliance manager is going through the system, it's reading it, and it's like, okay, these are things that you can prevent, or these are things that we have detected that need corrective. So you can correct those things and make sure that those things are taken care of. So now changing a little bit to labeling. So labeling, is interesting in the sense that uh, you can do labeling in different things when you do um, or how you manage the information. So you can manage and govern information by ensuring that content is kept only for the required time, right? So you want to make sure that there's a retention label. So you might say, oh, I only want to keep items for 6 months or X amount of time. Only one label can be assigned at a time. So that's one of the kind of limitations. And then the retention settings um, can be done on the content as well. Um, and then you can assign policies as well. So you can assign retention policies to a, let's say, site level, meaning to SharePoint site, or a mailbox level. So if you have an Office 365 mailbox, you can assign those levels. As we can see here in the example, we have Exchange, we have SharePoint, we have OneDrive, and then the Microsoft 365 groups, and then you can assign label policy B is being assigned to OneDrive and SharePoint. So those kind of things you can define, and a single policy, really can be applied to multiple locations. So that's the good thing about it. And it could be a specific location or user. So it's not that just one for all. So it makes it easier for you to define labels and then assign to multiple locations. And then lastly, for records management, you know, uh, records management, again, you have to kind of keep track of the records, because looking at the legal obligation, you have to make sure that you are abiding by the legal implications. So there might be some restrictions put on place to block certain activities. Um, so you have to kind of enable those records, and the administrator obviously is going to be enabling those labels. As we can see on the screen, you define the retention period. So retain items even if the user deletes it, mark items as a record, or delete items automatically. So this is going to be based on the classification you define and your retention policy, because at some point, if there's a legal challenge that is brought to you, you need to have some kind of data, and that's going to be basically based on the data classification. Any confidential data, highly confidential, or data would have to be probably retained longer than any data which is public information. And lastly, with data loss prevention, I know I kind of talked about the data loss prevention when we were talking in the beginning, but with data loss prevention, really you need to identify the policies, so it automatically prevents you from. And the example I gave was, if you put a PII, personal identifying information, meaning your home address, or something that a person can be identified. Once you have the data loss prevention, you can turn those things on. And the good thing with this is, it goes the sense, and you can actually have labeling as well in DLP. What that does for you is the sensitive information is applied to different Microsoft services. So you can apply it to Exchange Online, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint Online, Office 365, obviously Microsoft Teams. And then you can also apply it to devices as well. So if you want to apply it to Windows 10, 11, the Mac OS as well, and then the Defender, so Microsoft Defender for cloud apps, so that it can be applied, and even it can apply to on-premise repositories. So that really helps you with the preventive actions for data loss prevention. And the policies, are fairly easy to set up. Once you set up the policies, you can start monitor these policies. And obviously, sometimes you might have to come back and change the policies because there might be some false positive, but uh, you can create those items. Once the items are created, you can start playing with them. And depending on the product, right? So for example, in Microsoft Teams, you have the DLP capabilities extended to Microsoft Team chat and channel messages. So if you want to keep those specific files in there or even messages in private channels, you can apply the data loss prevention there, right? And again, all of this is integrated with Microsoft Security Copilot. So Security Copilot is integrated with not only Microsoft Purview, but yeah, with Microsoft Data Loss Prevention, and it supports Security Copilot. So make sure that these things are embedded from the get-go, and it's not really after you set this up. So with that being said, that's all I have for the presentation. What I'm going to do quickly now, I will go into the portal, and then I can show you guys what the portal looks like. So this is the Microsoft Purview portal, and this is just as vanilla as it gets. I did not make any changes to it, and the reason I didn't, I wanted to show you how it looks like when you log into the first time. So purview.microsoft.com, that's how you log onto it. And then the other thing is there's an option for pay as you go. So you can go pay as you go. Obviously, it's going to give you more capabilities. But one thing I wanted, which I kind of mentioned, is I was talking about the compliance manager, right? And then as you can see, this is going to spit out a number or a score. So I'm at a 57% score right now. It gives you, and then it also tells us, okay, what are the impacts? So failed, and it classifies all these things. So detect and remediation, sign in risk. So these are things probably we can go and take a look and remediate. The other good thing is it also shows from a solution effect. So you can say, okay, from an Azure standpoint, this is the remaining items, or even Exchange Online. There are 9 different remaining items for Exchange Online, and here they are. So you can see they're going to come back, and you can see, okay, so what are these things? Like enable mailbox archive, that's not enable mailbox retention policy. If that is something that is required, right? Because Microsoft's thinking broadly across the board. Some of the things might not even apply to you. But yeah, these things are there. So, and it does a great job of providing you with that score. So let me go back here. Actually, yeah. So what else can I show you? And honestly, like I could spend quite a bit of time, and obviously there's a new overview. So if I go to new, and you know, it gives you, it asks you more questions, and then it changes, so it gives you better assessment. So obviously, as you know, Microsoft keeps changing the UI, keeping improvements. And then one thing I also wanted to show you is once you go into solutions, you can go and take a look all the solutions. So we kind of talked about the DLP, we talked about the e-discovery. So there are a lot of things I did not talk about because, as I said, this is such a massive, massive product or solution that, just touching on all of the, because of time limitation, I wasn't able to pretty much touch on all of this. But yeah, this is what it is. We kind of talked about the data catalog, so you can do discovery with the data catalog. And even with the management, right? You can, and we talked about the data governance, right? So you can define. Interesting. I don't have access. But yeah, you can define the data governance basically, like we said, you can split this out into different departments, if you will, finance, accounting, what have you. And based on that, you can classify um, the business assets. With that being said, this is all I had for today. Also want to be respectful of the time as well. So I'll open up for any questions.